The boardroom smelled like cold coffee and desperation. "This is a circus," Margaretchen muttered, watching 13 directors argue like seagulls fighting over a single French fry. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be in Singapore, closing a merger that would pad her retirement fund by another zero. Instead, she was sitting in the back row of Hartwell Industries' emergency board meeting, summoned by a single text from an unknown number. Your name came up. "You should hear what they're saying. We need someone with gravitas," shouted a red-faced man in a suit that cost more than most cars. "Someone the market trusts." "The market doesn't trust anyone over 40 anymore. Gerald," snapped a woman with silver hair and sharper eyes. "They want disruption, innovation, not a dinosaur. Dinosaurs survived for millions of years. Patricia, that's called success." Margaret's phone buzzed. Her assistant. "Singapore team asking where you are." "Should I stall?" She typed back, "Give me 20 minutes. That's when the doors burst open and a young woman with a press badge and absolutely no shame pushed through security. "Is it true Hartwell is filing for bankruptcy next week?" she shouted, phone already recording. "Sources say the pension fund is empty." The room erupted. Gerald stood so fast his chair crashed backward. Patricia grabbed her water glass like she might throw it. 3 phones appeared from nowhere, all recording, all streaming, all capturing the exact moment when Hartwell Industries, a company that had employed this town for 67 years, began its very public death spiral. "Get her out," someone screamed. "The workers deserve answers," the reporter screamed back. And then, somehow louder than all of it, Gerald's voice cut through. "We need Margaretchen. She's the only one who can fix this." 13 heads turned toward the back row. Margaret felt the exact moment her anonymity died. The reporter's phone swung toward her face. The red recording light blinked like an accusation. "Miss Chun." The reporter was already moving closer. "Is it true you grew up here? Is it true you left under controversial circumstances? Is it true you were engaged to—" "No comment." Margaret stood, smoothing her jacket with hands that didn't tremble because she'd trained them not to. "I'm not involved with Hartwell Industries." "But you're here," the reporter pressed, "in a closed board meeting, during a crisis. That's involvement, Miss Chun." Patricia stepped forward, blocking the reporter's path. "Security is escorting you out now, Ms. Daniels." Amy Daniels, WKRT News. She smiled like a shark who just tasted blood. "And I'm already out. But so is this footage. Good luck with your closed meeting." The doors swung shut behind her. Silence. Then Gerald turned to Margaret with the desperate eyes of a drowning man spotting a life raft. "Take the CEO seat," he said. "Tonight." Margaret laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. "You're out of your mind. We're out of options." Gerald's voice cracked. "The vote is in 6 days. If we don't have someone credible at the helm, the workers walk, the creditors call their loans, and this town loses its largest employer. 3,000 jobs. Margaret, 3,000 families. That's not my problem. It became your problem when Amy Daniels filmed you sitting in that chair." Patricia's voice was ice. By morning, every financial outlet will be speculating about your involvement. Your Singapore deal, dead. Your reputation for staying above messy situations, gone. You're already in this, Margaret. The only question is whether you sink with us or swim. Margaret's hand moved to her necklace, a thin gold chain with a small diamond pendant she'd bought herself the day she made her first $1,000,000. She touched it when she needed to remember who she was, who she'd made herself into. 6 days, she said slowly. That's not enough time to turn anything around. It's enough time to stabilize. Gerald was practically begging now. Enough time to show the market we have leadership. Enough time to save the vote. And then what? I disappear back to my corner offices, and you find some other sacrificial lamb. Then you write your own ticket. Patricia slid a folder across the table. Consulting fees, board compensation, a success bonus that would make your Singapore deal look like pocket change. All documented, all legal, all yours if you give us 6 days. Margaret didn't open the folder. She didn't need to. She'd negotiated enough deals to know when she was being handed a blank check. What she needed was a reason to say no. Her phone buzzed again. Not her assistant this time. An email from a law firm she didn't recognize. Hartwell Industries Employee Pension Litigation. Dear Ms. Chun, our firm represents the following individuals in their claim against Hartwell Industries. She scrolled down the list of names. Former employees, current employees, retirees, people who'd given their lives to this company and were now fighting for scraps. And then, near the bottom, a name that stopped her cold. Daniel Reeves, pension claimant since 2019. Danny, the boy who'd carved their initials into the oak tree behind the football field. The man who'd asked her to stay. The one she'd left standing at the train station 34 years ago with a ring in his pocket and a future she'd been too scared to accept. Miss Chun. Gerald's voice felt very far away. Your answer? Margaret closed her eyes, touched her necklace, lied to herself about what she was feeling. 6 days, she said, not a minute more. The drive into town took 40 minutes, long enough for the sun to set, for the radio to cycle through 3 songs she didn't recognize, and for Margaret to convince herself this was purely professional. Then she turned onto Main Street and saw the banner, stretched across 4 lampposts, lit by fairy lights, impossible to miss. Lakewood Wedding Expo, this week only, featuring local vendors, including Reeves Restoration. Where forever begins. Below the banner, a blown-up photo smiled at her. Daniel Reeves, gray at the temples now. Laugh lines where smooth skin used to be, standing in front of a beautifully restored Victorian gazebo with a carpenter's belt and the same crooked grin that had made her heart stutter at 17. Margaret pulled over, turned off the engine, stared. Her necklace felt suddenly heavy. 6 days, she whispered to no one. What could possibly go wrong? Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed. It sounded like laughter. You're late. Margaret hadn't even stepped fully through the Hartwell Industries lobby doors before a woman materialized beside her, tablet in hand, heels clicking against marble with the precision of a metronome. "I wasn't aware we had an appointment," Margaret said, not slowing her pace. "We don't. I make appointments. I'm Victoria Slade, Chief Operations Officer." The woman matched her stride effortlessly, dark hair pulled back, so tightly it seemed to lift her eyebrows into a permanent expression of mild contempt. "The board hired me 6 months ago to oversee the transition." "What transition?" Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Whichever one becomes necessary." They entered the elevator together. Victoria pressed the button for the executive floor without asking. "I've prepared a briefing packet," she continued, handing Margaret a leather folder. "Financials, personnel files, liability assessments. You'll want to focus on pages 47 through 63. That's where the real bleeding is." Margaret didn't open the folder. "How long have you been positioning yourself for my job, Miss Slade?" "Since before you knew it existed." Victoria's smile sharpened. "Don't worry. I'm not your enemy. Enemies are inefficient. I prefer to be indispensable." The elevator opened onto chaos. Phones ringing, people shouting, a printer somewhere making a sound like mechanical screaming. And in the center of it all, a cluster of employees surrounding a television mounted to the wall. Amy Daniels' face filled the screen, confirmed that Margaret Chen, the so-called turnaround queen, has accepted the interim CEO position at Hartwell Industries. But our investigation has uncovered something even more interesting. The reporter's smile was pure predator. Ms. Chun grew up right here in Lakewood, graduated from Lakewood High, and according to multiple sources, left town under, shall we say, romantic circumstances. The screen cut to a yearbook photo, Margaret's senior portrait, complete with unfortunate bangs and hopeful eyes. Chun was reportedly engaged to local resident Daniel Reeves before abruptly leaving for college and never returning. Now, 34 years later, she's back. And Reeves? He's currently one of the plaintiffs in the pension lawsuit against the very company Chun has been hired to save. Murmurs rippled through the watching employees. "Makes you wonder," Amy continued, tilting her head like a curious vulture. "Is this a business decision or something more personal?" Margaret felt every eye in the room turned toward her. "Back to work," Victoria announced, clapping her hands twice. "The adults have things to discuss." The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Margaret caught fragments. "Heard she dumped him at the altar. No, it was a train station. My mother said he didn't leave his house for a month." "Well," Victoria said brightly, "that's certainly going to complicate community relations." Margaret's hand found her necklace. "I need to see the pension files. Page 72. And I need to meet with employee representatives. Scheduled for tomorrow. They're not enthusiastic. And Daniel Reeves?" The name caught in her throat like a splinter. "Is he on company property?" Victoria's expression flickered, something almost human passing behind her eyes. He's at the wedding expo, setting up his booth. Reeves Restoration does custom woodwork for ceremonies, gazebos, arches, altarpieces. She paused. Beautiful work, actually. He built the archway for my sister's wedding. Margaret absorbed this. The boy who used to build her birdhouses for extra credit now built structures for other people's happy endings. I need to speak with him, she said, privately, before this circus gets any louder. Bad idea. I didn't ask for your opinion. No, Victoria agreed, but you're getting it anyway. Right now, you're the outsider who swooped in to save the day. You talk to Reeves, and suddenly you're the ex-girlfriend trying to manipulate a plaintiff. Every decision you make gets questioned. Every move looks personal. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I know you think I'm the villain here, Miss Chun, but villains don't give free advice. I'm trying to help you survive the week. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Why? Because if you fail, the company gets sold to a private equity firm that will gut it for parts. I lose my job. 3,000 people lose theirs. And this town becomes another cautionary tale about corporate America eating its young. Victoria's jaw tightened. I grew up here too, Miss Chun. My mother worked the line for 31 years. So whatever you think my angle is, understand this. I want Hartwell to survive. I don't particularly care if you're the one who saves it, but you're what we've got. So I'm going to make sure you don't blow it by chasing ghosts. The wedding expo had transformed the town square into something out of a romantic fever dream. White tents billowed in the evening breeze. String lights crisscrossed overhead like constellations made to order. Couples wandered between booths displaying flowers, cakes, invitations, and promises of forever at competitive rates. Margaret had changed out of her boardroom armor into something less conspicuous. Dark jeans, a simple blouse, sunglasses she hoped would buy her anonymity. It didn't work. She felt the stares, heard the whispers, watched people pretend they weren't taking photos. She found Daniel's booth at the far end of the square. He was bent over a workbench, sanding the edge of a small wooden arch, sawdust catching the light like snow. His sleeves were rolled up, forearms still strong, hands still steady. A sign above him read, Reeves Restoration, crafting your beginning. Margaret stopped 6 feet away, close enough to see the gray in his hair, far enough to run if she needed to. The sawdust gives you away, he said without looking up. You always used to sneeze 3 times exactly, like clockwork. I grew out of it. Did you? He set down the sandpaper, straightened, looked at her for the first time in 34 years. His eyes hadn't changed, still that impossible blue-green, like a lake in summer, like the water where they'd had their first kiss on a dare that wasn't really a dare. Hello, Maggie. Nobody called her Maggie anymore. She'd made sure of it. Too soft, too small, too much like someone who could be hurt. Daniel. She pulled off her sunglasses, let him see her fully. I need to talk to you about Hartwell. About the lawsuit. Ah, he nodded slowly, something closing behind his eyes. So, this is business. Everything is business. That's a sad way to live. It's an honest one. He picked up a cloth, began wiping down his tools with the careful attention of someone who'd rather look at anything but her. What do you want to know? Are you going to be a problem? The question hung between them like a held breath. Daniel set down the cloth, crossed his arms. For a moment, Margaret saw the teenager he'd been, stubborn, proud, too in love to see the train coming. I'm not a problem. Maggie, I'm a plaintiff. There's a difference. His voice was steady, but she heard the edge beneath it. I worked at Hartwell for 12 years. Shop floor, then quality control, then they moved me to community liaison because I was good with people. When the pension fund started having issues, I asked questions. They didn't like that. Early retirement package. Very generous. Very mandatory. I didn't know. You didn't ask. The words landed harder than they should have. Margaret felt her defenses rising. The familiar walls she built brick by brick over 3 decades of boardrooms and negotiations. I'm trying to save the company, she said. That includes the pensions. All of them. Noble. He didn't sound convinced. Practical. If the company survives, there's a chance the fund can be rebuilt. If it doesn't, everyone gets pennies on the dollar. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached under his workbench and pulled out a folded newspaper, old and yellow at the edges. Do you know what I kept all these years? He handed it to her. The Lakewood Gazette, dated 34 years ago. The headline read, "Local student wins full scholarship to Stanford Business School." Below it, a photo of 17-year-old Margaret, grinning like she'd swallowed the sun. I was proud of you, Daniel said quietly, even after. I was so damn proud. Margaret's throat tightened. Her hand found her necklace, squeezed until the diamond bit into her palm. Danny, there's going to be a storage clean-out tomorrow, he interrupted, his voice businesslike again. The moment passed. Building C, old records room. The Historical Society asked me to help sort what's worth keeping. Apparently, there's a time capsule from our senior year that's finally ready to be opened. He met her eyes, and something flickered there. Pain, hope, or maybe just the ghost of a boy who'd believed in forever. You should be there, Maggie. Some things shouldn't stay buried. Before she could respond, her phone erupted with notifications. Victoria's name, over and over. Check the Lakewood gossip page. Now, Margaret opened the link. The headline screamed in bold pink letters. CEO returns TO marry the one she dumped. Wedding Expo reunion caught on camera. Below it, a photo taken moments ago. Her and Daniel standing close, his hand extended with the newspaper, her fingers reaching for it. From the angle, it looked almost tender, almost romantic, almost like a beginning instead of an ending. Well, Daniel said, peering at her screen with a rueful smile, I guess the whole town knows you're back now. Margaret stared at the photo, at the comments already flooding in Destiny and Gold Digger, and finally, and she doesn't deserve him, and felt the walls of her carefully constructed life begin to crack. The time capsule, she heard herself say, "What time tomorrow?" Daniel's smile softened into something dangerously close to hope. 10 a.m. Building C. And Maggie, he leaned closer, voice dropping. Whatever you're afraid of finding in there, it's been waiting a long time. Don't keep it waiting anymore. He turned back to his workbench, picked up his sandpaper, began to work. Margaret stood frozen, the newspaper clutched in her hand like a verdict, the noise of the wedding expo swirling around her like a prophecy she'd spent 34 years trying to outrun. Her phone buzzed again. Victoria, emergency board meeting, 7 a.m. They've seen the photos. And Margaret, bring armor. The emergency board meeting started with silence and ended with shouting. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Gerald slammed his palm against the mahogany table, his face achieving a shade of purple Margaret hadn't seen outside of medical textbooks. We hired you to stabilize the company, not to become a tabloid headline. I spoke to a plaintiff for approximately 4 minutes. Margaret said, her voice carefully level, in public, about business matters. That's not what the photos show. Patricia slid her tablet across the table, the Lakewood gossip page glowing accusingly. That shows a reunion, a romantic moment. The comments are calling it destiny. Do you have any idea what that does to our credibility? Since when do we base corporate strategy on gossip blog comments? Since those comments started trending on Twitter. Gerald's voice cracked. Our stock dropped 3% in pre-market trading. 3%. Because people think our interim CEO is more interested in rekindling high school romance than saving jobs. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, silent, watching. Her expression revealed nothing, but Margaret caught the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped against her tablet in an irregular rhythm. The situation is manageable, Margaret said. I'll issue a statement clarifying. No statements. Patricia cut her off. No more public appearances without approval. No more wandering around wedding expos like a lovesick teenager. You have 5 days left to convince this board and the market that you're worth the risk we took. Start acting like it. The meeting adjourned without resolution. Margaret gathered her things, ignoring the pointed looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when she passed. She was halfway to the elevator when Victoria fell into step beside her. That could have gone worse, Victoria offered. How? Gerald could have had an actual heart attack instead of just threatening one. Despite everything, Margaret almost smiled. Is that your version of optimism? It's my version of perspective. Victoria pressed the elevator button. I have the supplier reports you requested. Page 12 is where you'll want to start crying. Page 12 made Margaret want to do more than cry. Hendricks Manufacturing, Hartwell's primary component supplier for 30 years, had sent formal notice that morning. They were pulling their contract, effective immediately. No negotiation, no extension, no courtesy call. Just a single paragraph of legal language that translated to, "You're toxic. and we're not going down with you. Without Hendricks, Hartwell couldn't fulfill its current orders. Without current orders, there was no revenue. Without revenue, the board vote in 5 days was meaningless. There would be nothing left to vote on. Margaret read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up her phone. Linda, I need everything we have on alternative suppliers. Regional, national, international. I don't care if they're operating out of someone's garage. Get me options. Ms. Chun. Her assistant's voice was hesitant. I've already made some calls. Everyone's heard about Hendricks. Nobody wants to be next. Then find someone who hasn't heard yet. She hung up and stared out the window at the town below. From up here, Lakewood looked almost peaceful. Tree-lined streets, church steeples, the glitter of the wedding expo tents in the distance, like a promise of happiness she'd stopped believing in decades ago. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Building C, Storage Room 7. You need to see this before the Historical Society does. No signature, no explanation. Margaret should have ignored it. She should have stayed in her office, focused on the supplier crisis, acted like the professional she'd spent 34 years becoming. Instead, she grabbed her jacket. Building C was a relic from Hartwell's glory days. Brick walls, industrial windows, the faint smell of machine oil, and memories. Margaret found Storage Room 7 at the end of a dim hallway, its door propped open with a rusted filing cabinet. Inside, Victoria was kneeling beside a stack of cardboard boxes, her designer suit collecting dust, her tablet abandoned on a nearby shelf. You texted me, Margaret said. I did. Victoria didn't look up. Close the door. Margaret hesitated, then complied. If this is some kind of... It's not. Victoria finally stood, brushing off her knees with sharp, agitated movements. I found something while I was reviewing old files for the Historical Society. Something that changes things. Changes what things? Victoria handed her a folder. Inside, a single document, a wire transfer receipt dated 2 days ago. The amount made Margaret's stomach drop. $300,000. She read aloud. Transferred to Hendricks Manufacturing from. She trailed off, reading the account name twice to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. From your personal escrow account. My bonus escrow. The one tied to successful completion of the transition. Victoria's voice was flat, controlled, but Margaret caught the tremor beneath it. I liquidated it this morning. Paid Hendricks' outstanding invoice plus a loyalty incentive to get them to delay their withdrawal announcement by 48 hours. Margaret stared at her. You bribed our supplier. With your own money. I bought us time. There's a difference. Why? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she crossed to the window, staring out at the parking lot where workers were arriving for the morning shift, lunchboxes in hand, worry in their shoulders. My mother worked line 4 for 31 years, she said softly. She raised 3 kids on that salary, put me through college, paid for my sister's wedding. When she retired, She had a pension that was supposed to take care of her forever. Victoria's jaw tightened. It won't. The fund is underfunded by millions. If this company goes under, she loses everything. They all do. So you're not doing this for the company. I'm doing this for the people who are the company. Victoria turned to face her, eyes fierce. I know what you think of me, Miss Chun, the ambitious climber, the corporate shark. And maybe that's true, but sharks don't survive by letting their ecosystem collapse. I need Hartwell to live because everyone I love depends on it. Margaret looked down at the receipt in her hands. $300,000. Victoria's entire bonus. Years of work, of sacrifice, of clawing her way up from a factory worker's daughter to the C-suite, gone in a single wire transfer. Nobody knows about this, Margaret said slowly. Nobody can know. If the board finds out I'm personally invested in the outcome, they'll question every recommendation I make. If the employees find out, they'll think it's a bribe. If the press finds out, Victoria laughed bitterly. Well, you've seen what they do with information. Then why tell me? Victoria met her eyes. Because you're not the only one who left this town and made something of yourself. And you're not the only one who came back with something to prove. She picked up her tablet, straightening her jacket, reassembling her armor piece by piece. I'm not asking you to trust me, Miss Chun. I'm asking you to understand that we want the same thing. And maybe, just maybe, we're stronger if we stop treating each other like enemies. Margaret thought about the board meeting, the accusations, the assumption that everyone was playing angles, protecting positions, watching for knives in the dark. The 48 hours you bought, she said, what's your plan? Find an alternative supplier. Someone Hendricks hasn't poisoned against us yet. Victoria pulled up a file on her tablet. There's a manufacturing co-op in Milwaukee, small but hungry. They've been trying to break into our market for years. I have a contact who might get us a meeting. Might. He's my ex-husband, so it depends on how much he still hates me. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. And if he hates you a lot, then I'll remind him that I know about the thing with the boat and the IRS. Victoria's smile matched hers. Everyone has leverage, Ms. Chun. The trick is knowing when not to use it. They found Daniel in storage room 12, surrounded by boxes of old yearbooks and company newsletters, a cup of coffee going cold beside him. Ladies! He looked up with mild surprise. Didn't expect a delegation. Mr. Reeves. Victoria nodded politely. I understand you're helping the Historical Society with the archive review. Someone has to make sure they don't throw out anything important. His eyes moved to Margaret, softening slightly. You got my message about the time capsule? That wasn't you who texted me. I don't have your number, Maggie. Haven't for 34 years. Margaret glanced at Victoria, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. If not Victoria, and not Daniel, then who? Before she could pursue the thought, a worker appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Mr. Reeves? We found it. The senior class capsule. It's in the basement, behind a bunch of old equipment. Things rusted shut, but we got it open. Daniel stood, brushing dust from his jeans. Well, moment of truth. He looked at Margaret, something complicated moving behind his eyes. You coming? The three of them descended into the basement, following the worker past mountains of forgotten machinery and abandoned dreams. In a cleared space near the far wall, a metal box sat open on a folding table, its contents spread out like artifacts from another life. Yearbook pages, a mixtape labeled Summer '91, a class photo with faces Margaret half remembered, concert ticket stubs, love notes, promises made before anyone understood how easily promises break. And there, at the bottom, a small envelope with Margaret's handwriting. To Danny, open on our wedding day. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Maggie, Daniel's voice was gentle. You don't have to. Yes. She picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of decades in a single folded piece of paper. I do. But before she could open it, Victoria made a small sound of surprise. What's this? She was holding a different document, yellowed, official, stamped with a logo Margaret didn't recognize. A receipt for a wedding venue deposit, dated 34 years ago, made out to Margaret Chun and Daniel Reeves. Paid in full by Eleanor Hartwell, class benefactor. And at the bottom, in elegant cursive, valid in perpetuity. True love waits. Margaret stared at the receipt, at her name, linked to Daniel's, preserved in ink and intention for 3 decades. Eleanor Hartwell, she breathed. The founder's widow. She died 15 years ago, Victoria said quietly, but she never canceled this reservation. I checked. The venue still has it on file. They've been holding a date open every year just in case. Daniel took the receipt from Victoria's hands, reading it with an expression Margaret couldn't decipher. She always said we were inevitable, he murmured. Mrs. Hartwell. She taught our senior English class, made us read all those love poems. He looked at Margaret, and for a moment, 34 years collapsed into nothing. She believed in us, Maggie, even when we stopped believing in ourselves. Margaret's phone shattered the moment. Victoria again. Check the news. Now, the headline loaded slowly, each word a fresh wound. Hartwell CEO's secret past. Sources reveal Chun left hometown after scandal. Was ambition or betrayal the real reason? Below it, a quote from anonymous board sources suggesting Margaret had abandoned Daniel not for Stanford, but to escape consequences of something shameful, something that would destroy her credibility, something the town deserved to know. Margaret felt the ground shift beneath her feet. That's not true, she said, her voice barely a whisper. None of that is true. Daniel's hand found hers, squeezed once. I know. But the damage was already spreading, comments, shares, speculation multiplying like wildfire. And somewhere in the chaos, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message she read and immediately deleted, her face going carefully blank. Ms. Chun, she said slowly, there's something else you should know. About that scandal story. She hesitated. I know who planted it. Who? Victoria met her eyes. Me. 3 months ago. Before I knew, before I understood. She swallowed hard. I was building a case against you. For the board. In case they needed ammunition to block your appointment. She lifted her chin, accepting the consequences. I found a letter in an old archive, one that Daniel wrote to you years ago, one that might explain everything. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a faded envelope. I was going to use it against you, but now. She held it out like an offering, like a confession. Now, I think you need to read it. Margaret looked at the envelope in Victoria's hand, at the letter from Daniel she'd never received, at 34 years of misunderstanding, sealed in paper and silence. Danny, her voice cracked. Did you write me a letter after I left? Daniel's face went pale. I wrote you 100 letters, he said quietly, but I only mailed one, the one that mattered. His eyes moved to the envelope in Victoria's hand, the one that explained why I let you go. Margaret reached for it. Her fingers brushed the paper, and the basement lights flickered once, twice, and went out completely. The emergency generators kicked in after 30 seconds, bathing the basement in sickly yellow light. Margaret stood frozen, the envelope clutched in her hand, her heart pounding so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. Power grid's been unstable all week, the worker muttered, already heading for the stairs. I'll check the main breaker. Victoria's phone was glowing, notifications cascading like a waterfall of bad news. The outage hit half the downtown. Wedding expos running on backup. Social media is having a field day. Someone's already blaming you for the blackout, Ms. Chun. Of course they are. Margaret looked down at the envelope. Daniel's handwriting. Her name, spelled out in ink that had faded but not disappeared. I need a minute. You don't have a minute. Victoria's voice was tight. The board is calling an emergency session. Someone leaked the vendor crisis to the press. They're saying Hartwell can't keep the lights on, literally. Then they can wait 5 more minutes. Margaret's tone left no room for argument. Victoria, please. Something shifted in Victoria's expression, a crack in her professional armor. She glanced at Daniel, then back at Margaret. 5 minutes, she said. I'll stall them. Her heels echoed up the stairs, leaving Margaret and Daniel alone in the dim basement, surrounded by the debris of their shared past. You don't have to read it here, Daniel said quietly. You don't have to read it at all. It was a long time ago, Maggie. We were different people. Were we? She turned the envelope over in her hands. Sometimes I feel like I've been running from that girl for 34 years. And she's still right here, still waiting to see what happens next. Daniel leaned against a dusty shelf, arms crossed, watching her with those impossible eyes. What do you want to happen next? I want to understand. She slid her finger under the envelope's seal, feeling the paper resist and then give way. I want to know why you let me go. Why you never came after me. Why you? Read it, he said softly. Then we'll talk. Margaret unfolded the letter, Maggie, if you're reading this, then you're already gone. Stanford, business school, the future you've been dreaming about since we were 15, and you told me you were going to run the world someday. I'm not going to ask you to stay. I thought about it. God, I thought about it every night for the past month. I had this whole speech planned. Roses, the oak tree, maybe even that song you pretend you don't love. But here's the thing about loving someone, really loving them. You have to want their happiness more than you want your own. You're going to do incredible things, Maggie. You're going to walk into boardrooms and make people twice your age listen. You're going to build something that matters. And you're going to do it because you're brilliant and brave and so damn stubborn that the universe doesn't stand a chance. I can't be the thing that holds you back. If you stayed for me, if you gave up Stanford for a guy with sawdust in his hair and dreams that don't reach past the county line, you'd spend the rest of your life wondering. And eventually, you'd hate me for it. You'd hate yourself for it. I couldn't live with that. I couldn't watch the light in your eyes go out because I was too selfish to let you shine. So I'm letting you go. Not because I don't love you, because I love you too much to be your cage. Mrs. Hartwell, she helped me see it. We talked for hours after you got the scholarship letter. She said, true love isn't about possession. It's about wanting the best for someone, even when the best isn't you. She made me promise something. She said if we were really meant to be, the universe would give us another chance. And when it did, we'd both be ready. I didn't believe her, but I wanted to. I still want to. The wedding deposit, it was her idea. She said it was an investment in destiny. I thought she was crazy. Maybe she was. But she paid for it anyway, and she made me swear I'd never cancel it. So it's out there, Maggie, our reservation, waiting. Maybe you'll never come back. Maybe you'll find someone better, someone who matches the size of your dreams. I hope you do. I hope you find everything you deserve. But if you ever do come back, if the universe keeps its promise, I'll be here, building things, waiting, loving you across all the distance and years between us. Go be extraordinary, Maggie, and if extraordinary ever gets lonely, you know where to find me. Yours, always Danny. Margaret read the letter 3 times. The first time, the words blurred through tears she refused to let fall. The second time, she felt something crack open in her chest, a door she'd locked so long ago she'd forgotten it existed. The third time, she looked up at Daniel, standing patient and quiet in the half-light, and felt 34 years of walls begin to crumble. You let me go, she whispered. On purpose. You chose to lose me. I chose to free you. His voice was rough. There's a difference. I spent years thinking you didn't fight for me, that I wasn't worth fighting for, that I was easy to forget. Daniel moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Maggie, you were the hardest thing I ever lost, and I lost you every single day. Every time I drove past the train station, every time I heard that song on the radio, every time I built something beautiful and wished you could see it. He stopped an arm's length away. You were never easy. You were impossible, and I loved you anyway. Margaret's phone buzzed violently, shattering the moment. Victoria, can't stall anymore. Board is demanding your presence. They have something. I have to go, Margaret said, folding the letter with trembling hands. I know. We're not finished talking about this. Daniel's smile was sad and hopeful all at once. We've got 34 years of talking to catch up on. What's another few hours? The board had transformed the conference room into a war council. Gerald sat at the head of the table, flanked by two people Margaret didn't recognize. Sharp suits, sharper expressions, the unmistakable energy of lawyers who billed by the quarter hour. Miss Chun. Gerald's voice was ice. Please sit down. Margaret sat. Victoria slipped in behind her, taking a seat along the wall, tablet ready. We've received some disturbing information. Gerald continued. Information that calls into question your suitability for this position. What information? One of the lawyers slid a folder across the table. Margaret opened it. Inside, her college application essay, her scholarship records, financial aid documents from 34 years ago, and a highlighted paragraph that made her blood run cold. I am applying for emergency financial assistance due to unforeseen family circumstances. My father's business has declared bankruptcy, and my family is facing imminent foreclosure. Without this scholarship, I will be unable to attend Stanford or any other institution. You told everyone you left for opportunity. Gerald said quietly, the golden girl chasing her dreams. But that's not the whole story, is it, Miss Chun? You left because you were running. Your family was broke. The whole town would have known. And you, his lip curled, you were too proud to let anyone see you fall. Margaret felt the room tilt. That's not. It's public record now, or it will be by tonight. Patricia's voice was almost gentle, which made it worse. One of our board members felt the stakeholders deserved full transparency about your background. Which board member? Silence. Then a door at the far end of the room opened, and a man walked in. Richard Holloway, Hartwell's largest independent shareholder. 70 years old, silver-haired, with the patient smile of someone who'd been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. Miss Chun, he said smoothly, taking a seat. I apologize for the dramatics, but I felt it was important that everyone understand the full picture. The full picture, Margaret repeated flatly. You've positioned yourself as a savior, the successful CEO who returned to rescue her hometown. Very compelling narrative. Holloway steepled his fingers. But narratives can be reframed. What if the story isn't about salvation? What if it's about a desperate woman returning to the scene of her original escape, using nostalgia and romantic manipulation to secure one final payday before everything collapses? That's absurd. Is it? Holloway pulled out his phone, showing her a news headline. Chen's secret shame. CEO's family bankruptcy exposed. Did she flee Lakewood, or was she driven out? Below it, a comments section already flooding with speculation. And worse, screenshots of the Lakewood gossip page. now updated with exclusive insider information, painting Margaret as a con artist using Daniel Reeves as an emotional prop. Public sentiment is a fragile thing, Holloway said mildly. Right now, the town wants to believe in your love story. But what happens when they realize it was never about love? What happens when they see you're just another corporate shark circling wounded prey? Margaret stood, so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I came here to save this company. I came here because you begged me to, and now you're using my family's worst moment, a moment I've spent my entire career overcoming, as ammunition. Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. You're not protecting stakeholders, Holloway. You're protecting your exit strategy. You want the company to fail, so you can sell it off piece by piece and walk away rich. And I'm in your way. Holloway's smile didn't waver. Prove it. I intend to. She turned to leave, then stopped. Victoria. Ma'am. The alternative supplier. The Milwaukee Co-op. How quickly can you arrange that meeting? Victoria's fingers flew across her tablet. I can have us on a plane in 2 hours. My ex owes me a favor. Then let's go collect. Margaret walked out of the boardroom without looking back. Behind her, she heard Gerald sputtering, Patricia protesting, Holloway's smooth voice saying something about hasty decisions. She didn't care. In the hallway, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The wedding venue called. They're confirming your reservation for Saturday. Should they proceed? Margaret stared at the message. Saturday, the day of the board vote. The wedding she'd never had, scheduled for the moment that would decide everything. She thought about the letter in her pocket, Daniel's words. If the universe keeps its promise, I'll be here. She thought about Holloway's smug smile, the town's gossip, the weight of 34 years of running. And she thought about Victoria, who'd sacrificed her bonus in secret. Daniel, who'd sacrificed his happiness in silence. Mrs. Hartwell, who'd believed in destiny enough to pay for a wedding that might never happen. Everyone giving pieces of themselves for something larger than their own survival. Maybe it was time she did the same. She typed back, proceed, but don't tell anyone yet. Then she turned to Victoria, who was waiting by the elevator. Milwaukee, Margaret said, let's go save a company. Victoria smiled, a real one, finally, and after that. Margaret touched the letter in her pocket, the necklace at her throat, the reservation confirmation glowing on her phone. After that, she said softly, we stop running. The Milwaukee meeting lasted 4 hours and nearly killed them both. Victoria's ex-husband, a compact man named Derek with a grudge the size of Lake Michigan, had made them wait in a freezing conference room for 45 minutes before deigning to appear. Then he'd spent another hour explaining, in excruciating detail, why the Lakewood Co-op had absolutely no interest in partnering with a sinking ship being captained by a soap opera. We've seen the headlines, Derek said, leaning back in his chair with obvious satisfaction. Your CEO is more interested in rekindling high school romance than managing supply chains. Our board isn't convinced Hartwell will exist in 6 months. Why would we risk our reputation? Margaret had let him talk, let him preen, let him enjoy his moment of power over the woman who'd once been married to his ex-wife. Then she'd open her laptop and shown him the contracts. 3 major retailers, already in preliminary discussions. A product line expansion that would triple Hartwell's output within 2 years. And most importantly, a detailed financial projection showing exactly how much money the co-op stood to make if they became Hartwell's exclusive supplier. You can keep watching from the sidelines, Margaret said calmly, or you can be part of the biggest manufacturing comeback story this region has seen in a decade. Your choice, Mr. Palmer. But I should mention, I'm meeting with your competitors in Madison tomorrow. They seem very interested. She was bluffing. There was no Madison meeting. There were no competitors. But Derek didn't know that. The contract was signed by dinner. They landed back in Lakewood at 11 p.m., exhausted and wired, the signed agreement glowing on Victoria's tablet like a holy relic. That was impressive, Victoria admitted as they walked through the tiny regional airport. The bluff about Madison, I almost believed you. Good negotiators always have an exit strategy. Margaret pulled out her phone, checking messages, even when they're making it up as they go. Speaking from experience, speaking from 34 years of survival, the car Victoria had arranged was waiting outside, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, blessedly anonymous. Margaret slid into the back seat, letting her head fall against the leather, feeling every one of her 52 years in her bones. What's waiting for us tomorrow? She asked. Victoria consulted her tablet. Board meeting at 9 to present the Milwaukee deal. Press conference at noon. The town council wants a public statement about job security. And she hesitated. And the venue called again. They're finalizing setup for Saturday. They need to know about catering, flowers, music. Victoria's voice was carefully neutral. They also mentioned that someone leaked the reservation to the Lakewood gossip page. It's everywhere now. Margaret closed her eyes. Of course it is. There's more. Victoria pulled up a video on her tablet. This went live 2 hours ago. Amy Daniels' face filled the screen. That predatory smile firmly in place. Good evening, Lakewood. Amy Daniels here with a WKRT exclusive. We've obtained confirmation that Margaret Chin, the embattled interim CEO of Hartwell Industries, has secretly activated a wedding reservation at the prestigious Lakewood Gardens venue. The reservation, made 34 years ago, was paid for by the late Eleanor Hartwell herself. The screen cut to footage of the venue, white columns, manicured gardens, a gazebo that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. But here's where it gets interesting. Amy continued. According to our sources, the wedding is scheduled for this Saturday, the same day as Hartwell's crucial board vote. Is this a coincidence? A calculated PR move? Or something even more cynical? Another cut, this time to a man Margaret recognized. Richard Holloway, photographed leaving a restaurant, microphone shoved in his face. I think it's clear what's happening here. Holloway said smoothly. Ms. Chun is using personal drama to distract from her professional failures. The wedding, the ex-boyfriend, the nostalgic hometown hero narrative, it's all designed to manipulate public sentiment ahead of the vote. The board is deeply concerned. Amy reappeared, practically glowing with schadenfreude. Concerned indeed. We reached out to Ms. Chun for comment, but received no response. We also attempted to contact Daniel Reeves, the alleged groom-to-be, but he declined to speak on camera. However, we did obtain this statement from an anonymous source close to the situation. Text appeared on screen, white letters on black. Margaret Chin broke Daniel Reeves' heart 34 years ago. She left him for money and ambition. Now she's back, using his good name to save her reputation. She doesn't deserve him. She never did. And Lakewood deserves to know the truth. The video ended. Margaret sat in silence, the weight of the words pressing against her chest. Anonymous source, Victoria said quietly, but the phrasing sounds familiar. Money and ambition. That's the same language from the board leak about your family's bankruptcy. Holloway, almost certainly, he's trying to poison the well before the vote, make you radioactive, force the board to remove you before Saturday. Margaret stared out the window at the dark streets of Lakewood sliding past, the town where she'd fallen in love, the town she'd fled, the town that was now watching her like a reality show, waiting to see if she'd crash and burn. "What time is it?" she asked. "Almost midnight. Is Daniel still awake?" Victoria checked her phone. "I can find out." "Do it. Tell him I need to see him. Tonight." Daniel was waiting on his front porch when the sedan pulled up. His house was modest, but beautiful. A craftsman bungalow he'd clearly restored himself, with hand-carved railings and stained glass windows that caught the moonlight. A workshop sat behind the main structure, lights still on, sawdust visible through the windows. Margaret walked up the path alone. Victoria had stayed in the car, understanding without being told. "Couldn't sleep either?" Daniel asked, rising from his porch swing. "Haven't slept properly in 3 days." Margaret stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at him. "Did you see the news?" "Hard to miss. My phone's been ringing since sundown. Reporters, old friends, my mother's bridge club." He smiled ruefully. "Apparently, I'm the most eligible bachelor in Lakewood. Who knew? Danny, I'm sorry. This circus, it's my fault. I should never have come back. I should have." "Stop." He descended the steps, standing close enough that she could smell sawdust and coffee and something essentially him. "You didn't create this circus. Holloway did. The gossip pages did. People who'd rather watch a train wreck than help clear the tracks." His hand found hers, warm and steady. "You came back to save 3,000 jobs. That's not something to apologize for." "I came back for the wrong reasons," Margaret admitted. "When I saw your name on that pension document, I told myself it was business, that I could keep things professional, that I could face you and feel nothing." She laughed bitterly. "I've been lying to myself for 34 years. I thought I was good at it by now. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he led her to the porch swing, and they sat together, the night air cool against their skin. When you left, he said slowly, I told myself I'd made the right choice. Letting you go, setting you free, all those noble words I wrote in that letter. He shook his head, but the truth is, I was scared. Scared that if I asked you to stay, you'd say yes. And then one day, you'd wake up and realize you'd given up everything for a guy who builds gazebos. Danny, let me finish. He took a breath. I spent years being angry at you, at myself, at Mrs. Hartwell for convincing me that sacrifice was love. Then I spent more years being sad. Then I just went numb, built things, fixed things, pretended that was enough. He turned to face her, moonlight catching the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the decades of living etched into every feature. Then you came back, and all of it, the anger, the sadness, the numbness, it all just dissolved, like it was waiting for permission to finally let go. Margaret felt tears, threatening, hot and unwelcome. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person who deserves that wedding reservation. I've spent my whole life proving I don't need anyone. And now I'm terrified that if I let myself need you, I'll lose you all over again. And this time, it'll be my fault. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Worn velvet, faded with age. I've been carrying this for 34 years, he said quietly. Couldn't bring myself to return it. Couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Just kept it in my workshop, in a drawer I never opened, waiting for something I was too stubborn to name. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the moonlight like a promise. This isn't a proposal, Daniel said quickly. Not yet. Not like this, with cameras everywhere and the whole town watching. This is just a question, a possibility. He met her eyes. After the vote, if you still want it, if you still want me, I'll be here. Not for a crowd, not for a headline, just for you. Margaret stared at the ring, at his face, at the house he'd built with his own hands, waiting for someone to share it with. What if I fail? She whispered. What if Holloway wins and the company collapses, and I have nothing left to offer? Daniel closed the box, slipped it back into his pocket. Then we'll have nothing together, he said simply, and I'll finally get to prove that I never loved you for what you could achieve. I loved you for who you are. The girl who cried at sad movies and laughed at terrible jokes and dreamed so big it scared everyone around her. He smiled. That girl is still in there. Maggie, I can see her. And she's magnificent. Margaret's phone buzzed. Victoria, sorry to interrupt. Emergency. Board called a midnight session. Holloway's making his move. She showed Daniel the message. Go, he said, squeezing her hand. Save the company. Save the town. Then come back and let me save you for once. Margaret stood, every instinct screaming at her to stay, to choose love over duty, to finally stop running. Instead, she leaned down and kissed him. Soft, brief, a promise, not a conclusion. Saturday, she said against his lips. After the vote, if destiny's been waiting this long, it can wait 3 more days. Daniel's smile was worth 34 years of loneliness. I'll be the one in the gazebo, he said, pretending I'm not terrified. The midnight board meeting was already chaos when Margaret arrived. Gerald was shouting at Patricia. Patricia was shouting at her phone. 2 lawyers were whispering urgently in a corner, and at the head of the table, Richard Holloway sat like a king surveying his crumbling kingdom. Ah, Miss Chun. His smile was razor-thin. So glad you could join us. We were just discussing your future. My future is saving this company. Margaret took her seat, Victoria sliding in beside her. Speaking of which, we've secured a new supplier. Milwaukee Manufacturing Co-op, exclusive contract. The paperwork is signed. She slid the documents across the table. Holloway's smile flickered. Impressive, but ultimately irrelevant. How is a guaranteed supply chain irrelevant? Because the board has already voted. Holloway's voice was silk over steel. Emergency session, 30 minutes ago. Given the ongoing PR crisis and your clear conflict of interest, we've decided to accelerate the timeline. The public vote will be held tomorrow morning, not Saturday, and the board will be recommending a sale to Pinnacle Partners, immediate liquidation, maximum shareholder value. Margaret felt the ground shift beneath her. You can't do that. The bylaws require a 72-hour notice period, which we've satisfied through electronic communication. Holloway pulled out his phone, showing a time-stamped email, sent 3 days ago, to your corporate address, which you apparently haven't been checking. Victoria's face went pale. That email was filtered to spam. I saw it. I thought it was phishing. Unfortunate. Holloway's smile widened. But not our problem. The vote stands. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Hartwell Industries will cease to exist as an independent entity. And 3,000 jobs. Margaret's voice was ice. 3,000 families, the pension fund, collateral damage, regrettable but unavoidable. Holloway stood, buttoning his jacket. You should have stayed in Singapore, Ms. Chun. Some towns don't want to be saved. Some stories don't get happy endings. He walked out. Margaret sat frozen. The Milwaukee contract suddenly worthless in her hands. Victoria was already on her phone, whispering urgently. Gerald was slumped in his chair, defeated. Patricia was crying quietly into her sleeve. There has to be something, Margaret said. Some loophole, some way to delay. There isn't. Victoria's voice cracked. I've checked everything. Holloway's been planning this for months. He owns enough shares to force the vote, and he's already secured proxy support from 3 other board members. It's over. Margaret closed her eyes. It's over. The words echoed in her skull. The company, the town, the wedding that was supposed to happen Saturday, the future she'd only just allowed herself to imagine, all of it collapsing Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Same one as before. Check your email. The one from Eleanor Hartwell's estate. The one you've been ignoring. Margaret frowned, opened her email, scrolled past hundreds of unread messages until she found it. A message from a law firm she didn't recognize, dated 2 weeks ago. Subject: bequest from the estate of Eleanor Hartwell. Urgent. She opened it and began to read. Victoria. Her voice was strange, distant. How much stock does Holloway control? 31%. Why? And how much would someone need to block a forced sale? 34%. But no one has. Margaret turned her phone around. The email contained a single document, a stock certificate, 35% of Hartwell Industries, held in trust for 34 years, bequeathed to Margaret Chun upon her return to Lakewood for the purpose of, and the legal language was very specific, ensuring the company remains in hands that will honor its legacy and protect its people. Eleanor Hartwell's final gift. Destiny's last card. Call the lawyers. Margaret said, her voice steady now, the fire returning to her eyes. Call the press. Call everyone. She stood, the stock certificate glowing on her phone like a weapon. Richard Holloway wants a public vote. He's going to get one. And I'm going to show this town exactly what I came back for. Victoria was already dialing. And Maggie, she said, using the name for the first time. What about the wedding? Margaret thought about Daniel, the ring in his pocket, the gazebo waiting in the moonlight. Saturday, she said. The wedding happens Saturday, right after I destroy Richard Holloway and save this company. She smiled, fierce and bright. Mrs. Hartwell believed in destiny. Time to prove her right. The town square had never seen a crowd this large. Margaret stood backstage at the hastily constructed platform, watching through a gap in the curtains as thousands of people filled every available space. Workers in Hartwell uniforms, families with children on shoulders, elderly couples who remembered when Eleanor Hartwell herself walked these streets, news vans from 3 different stations, Amy Daniels front and center, camera ready, practically vibrating with anticipation. And somewhere in that sea of faces, Daniel, waiting, believing. 2 minutes, Victoria said, appearing at her elbow. Legal team confirmed the stock transfer is ironclad. Holloway's lawyers have been trying to find a loophole all night. There isn't one. How's he taking it? Badly. He threatened to sue the estate. Sue you, sue the ghost of Eleanor Hartwell if necessary. Victoria's smile was sharp. I told him to get in line. Margaret adjusted her jacket, not her usual boardroom armor, but something softer. A blue blazer Daniel had once said matched her eyes. She'd found it in the back of her closet at 3 a.m., couldn't remember why she'd kept it, then remembered exactly why. The workers, she said, are they here? Every single one, plus retirees, plus their families. Victoria's voice softened. They're wearing buttons. Maggie, someone made buttons overnight. They say Hartwell strong on them. Margaret's throat tightened. I haven't given my speech yet. They don't know if I'm going to save them or sell them out. They know. Victoria squeezed her arm. They've been watching you all week. The supplier deal, the way you fought Holloway, the fact that you came back at all. She paused. They know who you are, even if you're still figuring it out yourself. The crowd noise shifted, a ripple of anticipation. Margaret peeked through the curtains again and saw Holloway taking the stage, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his smile perfectly practiced. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying across the square. Thank you for coming. I know there's been a great deal of confusion about the future of Hartwell Industries. I'm here to provide clarity. Scattered boos from the crowd. Holloway ignored them. The board has carefully considered all options. And while we appreciate Ms. Chen's enthusiasm, the financial realities are clear. Hartwell cannot survive as an independent company. The responsible choice, the compassionate choice, is to accept Pinnacle Partners' offer and ensure an orderly transition. What about our jobs? Someone shouted. What about our pensions? Another voice added. Holloway raised his hands, the picture of reasonable concern. These are valid questions, and I assure you, Pinnacle has committed to retaining as many positions as economically feasible. That means layoffs. A woman near the front, gray-haired and fierce. I've seen economically feasible before. It means they keep the machines and fire the people. The crowd rumbled agreement. Please, Holloway said, his smile straining, let's maintain civility. The vote will proceed according to bylaws. All shareholders will have their say. And then I'll have mine. Margaret stepped through the curtains. The crowd erupted. She walked to the podium, feeling every eye on her, every camera, every judgment. Holloway's face cycled through surprise, anger, and something that looked almost like fear before settling into careful neutrality. Miss Chun, he said smoothly, I wasn't aware you'd be speaking. Funny, I wasn't aware you'd be lying. Margaret turned to face the crowd, ignoring his sputtering protest. Good morning, Lakewood. My name is Margaret Chun. Some of you remember me as Maggie Chun, the girl who sat in the back of Mrs. Patterson's chemistry class and set her lab notes on fire. Twice. Scattered laughter. A few older faces nodding in recognition. I left this town 34 years ago. I told myself it was for opportunity, for ambition, for a future bigger than anything Lakewood could offer. She paused. That was partly true, but it wasn't the whole truth. She glanced at Holloway, who was watching her with barely concealed fury. The whole truth is that I was scared. My family had lost everything. My father's business had failed. We were about to lose our house, and I couldn't stand the thought of everyone knowing, of everyone watching while the Chun family fell apart. Her voice cracked slightly. She let it. So I ran. I took my scholarship and my shame, and I built a life as far from Lakewood as I could get. And I told myself that success would make up for everything I'd left behind. The crowd was silent now, listening. It didn't Margaret's eyes found Daniel in the audience, standing near the gazebo display from the wedding expo, watching her with an expression that made her heart ache. Success is wonderful. I'm proud of what I've built, but success without connection is just accumulation. Trophies in an empty room. And I've spent 34 years collecting trophies, while the people I loved collected dust. She turned back to address Holloway directly. Mr. Holloway wants you to believe that selling Hartwell is the responsible choice, the compassionate choice. She let the words hang. But I've read Pinnacle's acquisition history. 17 companies in 10 years. Average workforce reduction, 62%. Average pension fulfillment, 31 cents on the dollar. Average time from acquisition to total dissolution, 18 months. Murmurs from the crowd. Holloway's jaw tightened. That's not compassion, Margaret continued. That's butchery with better PR. And I didn't come back to this town to watch 3,000 families get carved up for shareholder value. You came back for a photo opportunity. Holloway snapped, abandoning his composure. For nostalgia, for some pathetic attempt to relive your glory days while the rest of us deal with reality. I came back, Margaret said quietly, because Eleanor Hartwell asked me to. She pulled out her phone, projecting the stock certificate onto the large screen behind her. 35% of Hartwell Industries, held in trust for 34 years, bequeathed to me by Eleanor Hartwell herself, with specific instructions that it be used to protect this company and its people. Margaret smiled. Mrs. Hartwell was my senior English teacher. She taught me that words have power, but only if you have the courage to use them. She also taught me that true love isn't about possession. It's about wanting the best for someone, even when the best isn't you. Her eyes found Daniel again. She believed in destiny. She believed that if two people were meant to be together, the universe would find a way. And she believed in this company, not as a profit center, but as a community, a family, a promise kept across generations. Margaret turned back to the crowd. I'm not asking you to trust me because I'm successful. I'm asking you to trust me because I finally understand what success actually means. It means showing up. It means staying. It means fighting for people even when it's easier to walk away. She took a breath. I'm not walking away. Not this time. I'm here to save Hartwell Industries, and I'm here to stay. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, someone starting a chant of Hartwell Strong that spread like wildfire. Holloway grabbed Margaret's arm, pulling her aside, his face contorted with rage. You think this changes anything? I'll tie this up in litigation for years. You'll what? Victoria appeared beside them, tablet in hand, smile sharp as a blade. File a lawsuit against a legally binding bequest. Challenge stock certificates that have been authenticated by 3 separate law firms. She pulled up a document. Or maybe you'd like to explain this to the SEC? She showed him the screen. Margaret glimpsed financial records, transaction histories, a pattern of trades that even her untrained eye recognized as deeply problematic. You've been shorting Hartwell stock for 6 months. Victoria said pleasantly, betting against the company you're supposed to be protecting. That's securities fraud, Mr. Holloway, the kind that comes with prison time. Holloway's face went gray. Where did you? Your ex-assistant has very strong opinions about loyalty and a remarkable memory for passwords. Victoria's smile widened. The FBI will have questions. I suggest you get a good lawyer. Holloway looked at Margaret, at Victoria, at the crowd still cheering, still chanting, completely oblivious to the private drama unfolding at the edge of the stage. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, Margaret said calmly. It is. She turned her back on him and walked to the microphone. The vote is called. All shareholders in favor of rejecting Pinnacle's offer and maintaining Hartwell Industries as an independent company, please indicate now. Hands rose across the square. Workers, retirees, small shareholders who'd held onto their stock through every crisis, and Margaret herself, her 35% carrying the weight of Eleanor Hartwell's faith. The motion carries, Victoria announced, checking her tablet. 68% in favor. Hartwell Industries remains independent. The roar was deafening. The wedding happened at sunset. Not the grand affair the town had imagined. No press, no cameras, no gossip columnists breathlessly documenting every detail. Just 50 people in the Lakewood Gardens venue, surrounded by flowers that Margaret's assistant had somehow conjured in 6 hours, sitting on chairs that Daniel had built himself over 3 sleepless nights. Margaret stood at the entrance, her dress simple and cream-colored, her necklace notably absent. You okay? Victoria asked, straightening her veil. Terrified. Margaret laughed shakily. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, and now I can't feel my legs. That's how you know it's real. Victoria squeezed her hands. I'll be in the front row. Try not to trip. She disappeared inside, leaving Margaret alone with her thundering heart. The music started, not a traditional march, but the song Daniel had mentioned, the one she pretended not to love. She did love it. She'd always loved it. She'd just been too afraid to admit how much. The doors opened. Daniel stood at the end of the aisle, in front of the gazebo he'd built for other people's weddings, finally getting to use it for his own. He was wearing a simple suit, slightly rumpled, sawdust still visible on his shoes. He was crying. Margaret walked toward him, and with every step, 34 years fell away. The girl who'd run from this town became the woman who'd returned to save it. The boy who'd let her go became the man who'd never stopped waiting. They met in the middle, hands finding each other like magnets, like destiny, like something that had always been inevitable. Hi, Daniel whispered. Hi yourself. Margaret's voice cracked. Nice gazebo. Thanks. Built it for a wedding. His smile was watery. Wasn't sure it would ever get used. Danny. She cupped his face in her hands. I'm sorry. For leaving. For staying away. For being so scared of meeting you that I almost missed this entirely. Maggie. He covered her hands with his. You're here now. That's all that matters. The officiant cleared her throat. Victoria's mother, as it turned out, ordained online specifically for this occasion. Dearly beloved, she began, her voice warm and slightly nervous, we are gathered here to witness something 34 years in the making. And frankly, it's about time. Laughter rippled through the small crowd. The vows were simple. The rings were simpler. Daniel's original ring for her, and a band she'd had made overnight from her success necklace, the diamond reset, the gold melted down and reformed into something new. I spent my whole life chasing success, Margaret said, sliding the ring onto his finger. But I finally understand that the only success that matters is being brave enough to love someone completely. You taught me that 34 years ago and every day since, even when I wasn't paying attention. I spent my whole life building things, Daniel replied, his voice rough. Gazebos and arches and houses for other people's happiness. But I was really just practicing, waiting for the day I'd get to build something with you. He slid the ring onto her finger. This is that day, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret coming home. By the power vested in me, by a website and 34 years of destiny, Victoria's mother announced, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss your bride. Daniel kissed her like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. The crowd cheered. Someone popped champagne. Victoria was definitely crying, though she'd deny it later. And at the back of the venue, unnoticed by everyone except Margaret, a woman in her 80s sat watching with a satisfied smile. Margaret caught her eye across the crowd. The woman winked. Then she was gone, as if she'd never been there at all. Later, after the cake and the dancing and the toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilariously embarrassing, Margaret slipped away to the garden. Daniel found her by the fountain, staring up at the stars. Escaping your own wedding, he teased, taking it in. She leaned against him as he wrapped his arms around her. Did you see her? The older woman in the back. What older woman? Margaret smiled. Never mind. Probably just a ghost. This town does have a lot of those. They stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of celebration drifting from the venue. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now, I have to actually run a company, figure out how to be a CEO and a wife, and maybe, eventually, part of this community again. She turned in his arms. Think Lakewood's ready for that. Lakewood's been ready for 34 years. He kissed her forehead. The question is whether you're ready. Margaret thought about the girl who'd run away, the woman who'd run toward, the path that had seemed like escape, but was really just the long way home. I'm ready, she said. I'm finally ready. Her phone buzzed. One last message from Victoria. Gossip page update. CEO saves company, marries sweetheart. Looks amazing doing both. Even Amy Daniels is calling it romantic. You've officially broken the internet. Also, your best friend wants to give a speech. She says she's been holding on to a bouquet ribbon for 34 years, and Destiny needs to stop being lazy. Margaret laughed. What? Daniel asked. Nothing. Just the universe has a sense of humor. From inside. She heard the unmistakable voice of her college roommate taking the microphone, demanding everyone's attention for the real story of how Margaretchen almost ruined the best thing that ever happened to her. "Should we go back in?" Daniel asked. Margaret took his hand. "In a minute. I want to remember this. The stars, the fountain, the moment everything finally made sense." She reached up to touch her neck, forgetting that her necklace was gone. Then she smiled, feeling instead the new charm she'd slipped on that afternoon, a small wooden heart Daniel had carved from the oak tree behind the high school football field. The one with their initials, the one that had witnessed their first kiss, and now, somehow, their last beginning. "Hey, Danny." "Yeah. Thank you for letting me go, for waiting, for believing in destiny even when I'd given up." He pulled her close. "Thank you for coming back, for saving the company, for saving me." He kissed her hair, for finally having the wedding we never had. Inside, her best friend was telling the story of the bouquet ribbon, and the crowd was laughing. And Victoria was probably already planning the company's next strategic initiative. And somewhere in the universe, Eleanor Hartwell was nodding with satisfaction. Margaretchen had spent 34 years running from love. Tonight, she finally let it catch her.